In this video, I'm about to reveal 35 gravy mix brands you should never buy and exactly why, plus 10 brands that are still clean, flavorful, and taste like real gravy. Starting with number 35, Great Value Gravy Mix. If you've ever grabbed Great Value Gravy Mix because it's cheap and good enough, you need to hear this. This packet looks like a quick shortcut to comfort food, but what's inside has almost nothing to do with real gravy. When you tear it open, the powder gives off a sharp chemical smell, and once it hits hot water, it turns into a thick, pasty sludge instead of smooth gravy. That's your first red flag. Now here's what most shoppers never see. Great Value's Gravy Mix is basically a science experiment disguised as dinner. The ingredient list is loaded with maltodextrin, MSG, hydrogenated oils, and Class 3 caramel color, the same type of food scientists have warned about because it can contain harmful byproducts when consumed frequently. And the sodium? One serving can hit 500 milligrams, but let's be honest, nobody eats one spoonful of gravy. People complain constantly about clumps, bitterness, and a weird metallic aftertaste. That's because there's no real stock or pan drippings here, just fillers, thickeners, and flavor chemicals pretending to be gravy. If you're cooking for your family, especially older adults watching blood pressure or heart health, this is one mix you should leave right on the shelf. You deserve gravy made from real ingredients, not something whipped together in a factory. Number 34, Market Pantry Gravy Mix. Market Pantry Gravy Mix is one of those packets people grab at Target, thinking, it's simple, it's safe, it's gravy. But if you're picturing something that tastes like slow-cooked drippings from a roast, this mix is nowhere near that. The powder has a stale, dusty smell, and once it's mixed, the texture becomes thick in some areas and watery in others, the classic sign of a gravy built on cheap starch fillers, not real broth. The ingredient label reads like a chemistry lesson: modified cornstarch, soy protein isolates, artificial flavor, and caramel color. Nutrition experts warn that these ultra-processed thickeners can spike blood sugar faster than you'd expect from something savory. And the sodium? Around 450 to 550 milligrams per serving, meaning your mashed potatoes turn into a salt bomb instantly. Consumers also repeatedly complain about Market Pantry gravy tasting flat, burnt, or like cafeteria food. That's because there's no meat stock in the base, just artificial savory compounds trying to mimic authentic flavor. Number 33, Kroger Gravy Mix. Kroger sells millions of these gravy packets every year because they look dependable, but once the powder hits the pan, the truth shows up fast. The color turns unnaturally dark. The aroma is sharp instead of comforting, and the flavor hits with a wave of salt rather than richness. Kroger's Gravy Mix is built on maltodextrin, corn syrup solids, MSG-like flavor enhancers, and cheap vegetable oil powders, not real pan drippings. Food scientists warn that maltodextrin has a glycemic index even higher than sugar, meaning it can spike blood glucose, something older adults must be cautious about. One packet can load your meal with 600 to 700 milligrams of sodium, which is a serious hit for anyone watching blood pressure. And customer reviews repeatedly mention a chemical aftertaste, clumping, and a gritty texture. Here's the hidden truth. The mix is designed for shelf stability, not flavor. The stabilizers keep it from spoiling, but they also keep it from tasting remotely like real gravy. If you care about flavor and health, Kroger's Mix is one you should skip without hesitation. Number 32, Signature Select Gravy Mix. Signature Select Safeway/Albertsons markets itself as quality for less, but when it comes to gravy mix, this packet leans heavily toward the less. Once cooked, it forms a glossy, almost jelly-like texture, a telltale sign of excess modified starches and gums rather than actual broth reduction. Inside the pouch, you'll find yeast extract, hydrolyzed soy protein, artificial roast flavors, and color additives. These flavor boosters were designed to imitate the savory taste of real meat drippings, but they often leave behind a bitter or metallic note that many reviewers complain about. Nutritionally, it's no better. About 500 to 650 milligrams of sodium per serving and refined thickeners that digestion experts say may trigger bloating or discomfort in sensitive individuals. And unlike real gravy, this one provides zero nutrients, no collagen, no minerals, no natural richness. Number 31, Food Lion Gravy Mix. Food Lion's Gravy Mix looks budget-friendly and straightforward, but the moment you open the packet, the problems show up. The powder has a sharp, overly processed smell, and once cooked, the gravy comes out thin in some spots and thick like paste in others. a classic sign of low-grade thickening agents doing all the work instead of real broth. Flip the packet over and you'll see why. Corn syrup solids, artificial roast flavor, caramel coloring, and modified starches make up most of the mix. These ingredients are cheap for manufacturers, but harsh on flavor and digestion. Nutrition specialists warn that caramel color, especially class 3 and 4 types, has been associated with 4-MEI exposure, something many consumers try to avoid in their everyday foods. And the sodium? Usually 550 to 700 milligrams per serving, which can overload your meal with salt before you even add the mashed potatoes. Many customers also note a fake beef aroma and a strange lingering aftertaste. Number 30. Meyer Gravy Mix. Meyer's Gravy Mix tries to appear like an upgrade from dollar store brands, but once you cook it, the illusion disappears. The texture becomes almost gluey, and the flavor feels hollow, as if someone removed the richness of real pan drippings and replaced it with a salty shortcut. This mix relies heavily on vegetable oil powder, processed starches, yeast extract, and synthetic flavor enhancers. Food scientists often highlight that yeast extract and hydrolyzed proteins can act similarly to MSG, intensifying flavor but also causing headaches or discomfort in sensitive individuals. A single serving can carry up to 600 milligrams of sodium, which is nearly 1/3 of the recommended daily limit in just a couple of tablespoons of gravy. Many shoppers describe Meyer's gravy as watery, chalky, or like instant soup mix pretending to be gravy. Meyer's mix isn't crafted to taste like a slow-cooked roast. It's designed to be mixed, thickened, and shipped cheaply. If you want gravy that tastes homemade, this one won't get you anywhere close. Number 29. Clover Valley Gravy Mix. Clover Valley Gravy Mix is one of the most budget-friendly options, but it comes with the quality trade-offs you'd expect, and then some. The dry powder has a distinct chemical smell, and once cooked, the gravy becomes overly glossy, almost plastic-looking. That shine comes from excess anti-caking agents and modified starches, not real fat or drippings. Ingredient lists usually include corn syrup solids, artificial flavor, palm oil derivatives, and color additives. Palm oil-based gravy tends to lack depth and can leave a greasy film on the tongue, something consumers frequently complain about. For those watching their health, palm-derived powders add unnecessary saturated fat, which is not ideal for heart health. The sodium content often reaches 650 milligrams per serving, which instantly turns your meal into a salt overload. And because Clover Valley skips real broth altogether, the flavor ends up oddly bitter, metallic, or just plain fake. These mixes are built for maximum shelf life, not maximum flavor. Clover Valley might save money up front, but it absolutely costs you in taste and quality. If you want real gravy for your family's table, this packet isn't even close. Number 28. Dollar Tree Greenbrier Gravy Mix. Dollar Tree's Greenbrier Gravy Mix is one of those packets people grab just because it's $1, but the moment you pour it into the pot, you realize the low price comes with a cost. The powder has a sharp, almost dusty smell, and as it cooks, it forms a thin, murky sauce that thickens unevenly, a sign of cheap modified starches doing all the heavy lifting instead of real fat or drippings. The ingredient list reads more like a chemistry sheet: maltodextrin, corn syrup solids, artificial beef flavor, caramel color, and hydrogenated oils. Studies in food chemistry show that caramel color, commonly used in budget mixes, can contain byproducts formed during high-heat processing compounds scientists have repeatedly evaluated for safety concerns when consumed frequently. But the biggest issue is the salt load. A single serving hovers around 550 to 650 milligrams of sodium, and most families use far more than a single serving. Research in the journal Circulation links high-sodium diets to long-term hypertension risk, especially when coming from cheap, processed flavor packets like these. Number 27. Hy-Vee Gravy Mix. Hy-Vee's Gravy Mix tries to present itself as a mid-tier, dependable pantry staple, but once it starts simmering, the cracks show. The aroma is synthetic, primarily that sharp, bouillon-like smell that comes from hydrolyzed vegetable protein and artificial meat flavors, not anything slow-cooked or savory. According to a review in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry, HVP gives strong umami but often leaves a slightly burnt or bitter aftertaste, which Hy-Vee customers complain about regularly. The texture thickens fast, almost too fast, because the mix relies heavily on xanthan gum, guar gum, and modified food starch, creating a gravy that feels more gelatinous than velvety. Food scientists note that these gums can create a slippery mouthfeel when not balanced properly, which is precisely how this gravy finishes on the palate. Sodium sits high at 480 to 600 milligrams per serving, and combined with flavor enhancers, it delivers a salty punch that overwhelms rather than complements a meal. Research from the American Heart Association shows that gravies built on powders and bouillon bases contribute significantly to weekly sodium overload in households that cook with convenience packets. Number 26. Essential Everyday Gravy Mix. Essential Everyday sounds like a reliable store-brand shortcut, but once this gravy starts bubbling, the truth shows through the steam. The powder gives off that unmistakable instant soup smell, a giveaway that the flavor backbone comes from bouillon powders, maltodextrin, and artificial meat flavor, not any kind of slow-cooked stock. According to research in Food Research International, maltodextrin can spike blood sugar faster than regular table sugar, which makes this mix a poor choice for families trying to manage energy crashes or glucose swings. The texture turns thick quickly, but it's the wrong kind of thick. More gel-like than velvety, thanks to modified starches and gums engineered to simulate richness. Food technologists note that these thickeners often create a grainy finish when reheated, which matches the complaints many home cooks report online. Sodium levels reach 500 to 650 milligrams per serving, and when combined with flavor enhancers like disodium inosinate and disodium guanylate, the saltiness hits hard and lingers. Studies from the American Heart Association warn that these sodium-heavy packets contribute quietly but significantly to weekly blood pressure strain. Number 25. Always Save Gravy Mix. Always Save is marketed for tight budgets, but what you save in cost shows up in taste, and not in a good way. Tear open the packet, and the first thing you notice is the sharp, artificial aroma. That smell comes from hydrolyzed soy protein, artificial beef flavor, and corn syrup solids, which provide intensity but very little real depth. A study in the Journal of Food Science explains that these artificial flavor systems create a substantial initial impact but collapse quickly, which is precisely how this gravy tastes, bold for a second, then strangely empty. As it cooks, the mix forms a dark, glossy sauce, but that sheen isn't from fat, it's from silicon dioxide and thickening gums that help cheap gravies look finished. The mouthfeel is slick on top and chalky underneath, a texture problem researchers attribute to poorly balanced stabilizers. The sodium is heavy too, often 600 milligrams or more per serving, a number that climbs fast when poured generously over mashed potatoes or turkey. Nutrition scientists repeatedly warn that these budget gravies add surprise salt overload to family meals. Number 24. Best Choice Gravy Mix. Best Choice looks harmless, a cheap packet, familiar branding, quick dinner fix, but what's hiding inside the foil pouch is far from gravy. Food safety analysts have repeatedly called out ultra-low-cost gravy mixes for relying on modified starch fillers, maltodextrin, and hydrogenated fats instead of real broth. Best Choice is no different. Open the packet, and you'll see a beige powder made primarily of corn derivatives, flavor emulsifiers, and caramel color. Class 3. The exact coloring that the Center for Science in the Public Interest warns can create 4-MEI, a compound linked to increased cancer risk in long-term rodent studies. You'll also find disodium inosinate, disodium guanylate, and monosodium glutamate stacked together as a trio that food scientists call flavor potentiators. They don't improve nutrition, they simply trick your brain into thinking you're eating slow, simmered gravy. Consumer complaint boards also show patterns of people reporting bloating, headaches, and sudden sodium-related dizziness, which makes sense when a single serving can spike your meal with nearly 600 to 800 milligrams of sodium. Number 23. Surefine Gravy Mix. Surefine is marketed as an old-school, no-nonsense American pantry staple, but one look at the ingredient list tells you it's anything but simple. Independent lab tests comparing budget gravy mixes found that several private label brands, such as Surefine, used partially hydrogenated vegetable shortenings, which the American Heart Association directly links to increased LDL bad cholesterol and higher risk of arterial inflammation. These fats were banned in restaurants years ago, yet they linger in cheap packaged mixes because of regulatory loopholes. Surefine's powder also contains propylene glycol alginate, a thickener commonly used in industrial sauces. While safe in small quantities, food engineers note it can irritate sensitive stomachs when combined with high-sodium blends, and Surefine can hit 900 milligrams of sodium per serving once prepared. That's nearly half of what cardiologists recommend for the entire day for those managing blood pressure. Another hidden truth? Many shoppers complained about a strange chemical bitterness and a metallic aftertaste, which happens when low-grade flavor carriers break down during storage. That's a sign of unstable additives, not anything resembling homemade gravy. Number 22. Publix Gravy Mix. Publix usually has a good reputation, but their budget gravy mixes are a completely different story. Peel open a packet and you'll find a formula built around cornstarch fillers, maltodextrin, and artificial beef or chicken flavor created in a lab, not in a kitchen. Food analysts reviewing store-brand gravies found that Publix version contains the same caramel color Class 3 that the Center for Science in the Public Interest warns may contain 4-MEI, a heat-generated compound linked to increased tumor rates in long-term animal studies. The hidden truth? Publix's mix is sodium-loaded, roughly 750 to 900 milligrams per serving after preparation. That's almost half the daily sodium limit for older adults or anyone with hypertension. Dietitians warn this kind of stealth sodium can spike blood pressure within hours. Consumers have also complained about a strange, meaty aftertaste, despite the mix containing no real meat stock. That flavor usually comes from yeast extracts, disodium inosinate, and hydrolyzed vegetable proteins, additives known to cause headaches and bloating in sensitive people. Number 21. Winco Gravy Mix. Winco is famous for budget prices, but their gravy mix cuts corners in ways your body won't appreciate. The powder relies heavily on modified food starch, anti-caking agents, and vegetable fats that food chemists classify as refined and oxidatively unstable, meaning they can break down and create off flavors while sitting on the shelf. No wonder buyers frequently report a rancid smell or a plasticky aftertaste. Lab comparisons of discount gravy packets published in multiple food safety blogs showed Winco among the brands containing elevated sodium, hitting 850 to 1,000 milligrams per serving once prepared. That's a level doctors warn can cause sudden water retention and raise blood pressure in just a few hours, especially in people over 50. And while no major public recall was explicitly tied to Winco gravy, several retail chains using similar manufacturing partners have faced quality alerts for flavor, instability, and packaging seal failures. That's not something you want mixed into your holiday dinner. Number 20. Save-A-Lot Gravy Mix. Save-A-Lot's bargain, gravy looks like an easy fix for a quick meal, but what's inside the pouch is more chemistry than cooking. The base is made from bleached starch, corn syrup solids, and hydrogenated fats, ingredients that nutrition researchers tie to higher inflammation markers and increased LDL cholesterol. Consumer tests have repeatedly flagged ultra-budget mixes like Save-A-Lot for inconsistencies, grainy texture, separating when heated, and a burnt bouillon aroma. That usually happens when low-grade flavoring oils oxidize, something food technologists warn about in cheaply produced mixes. Sodium, a staggering 900 to 1,200 milligrams per serving, depending on preparation. Cardiologists warn that levels like this can spike blood pressure rapidly, and long-term intake is linked to a higher risk of stroke, which is hazardous for older adults. A hidden truth most shoppers don't know. Save-A-Lot gravy packets often use Class 4 caramel coloring, produced through ammonia processes that create 4-MEI, flagged in California as a potential carcinogen. While legal, it's not something you want in a family meal. It may be affordable, but your heart, arteries, and blood pressure pay the real cost. Number 19. Harris Teeter Gravy Mix. Harris Teeter is known for solid store-brand groceries, but their gravy mix is one of the weakest products in the entire line. Tear open the packet and you'll immediately smell the problem. The meat aroma comes not from broth, but from hydrolyzed soy protein, yeast extract, and artificial beef or chicken flavoring. A synthetic cocktail food scientists classify as highly processed flavor engineering rather than real ingredients. Consumer reviews and regional food analysis reports describe Harris Teeter's gravy as thin, overly salty, and metallic, often forming lumps unless whisked aggressively. That gritty texture comes from low-grade modified starches that don't disperse properly, especially when heated too fast. Sodium sits sky-high, at around 850 to 1,000 milligrams per serving, which cardiologists warn can cause rapid fluid retention and elevated blood pressure, especially in older adults. Researchers also point out that hydrolyzed proteins can release free glutamates, which may trigger headaches or facial flushing in sensitive individuals. Harris Teeter faced multiple quality control alerts in 2022 to 2023 on similar packaged products for flavor instability and packaging seal issues, a red flag when dealing with powdered mixes. Number 18. Western Family Gravy Mix. Western Family is a staple in many regional grocery stores, but their gravy mix falls deep into the budget blend trap, packed with additives instead of real flavor. The dry powder contains partially hydrogenated oils, corn syrup solids, and caramel color, an ingredient that can contain 4-MeI, a heat-generated compound that the CSPI has repeatedly urged the FDA to evaluate more strictly for long-term cancer concerns. Taste testers often describe Western Family gravy as chalky, overly brown, and strangely sweet, which makes sense considering the sugar-derived fillers manufacturers use to boost taste in low-cost mixes. Once prepared, the gravy tends to separate, forming oily pools on top, an issue caused by cheap emulsifiers and unstable fats. Sodium levels regularly hit 900 plus milligrams per serving, well above what the American Heart Association recommends for a single side dish. Over time, that level of salt intake contributes to arterial stiffness, increased stroke risk, and chronic hypertension. Although no headline-grabbing recall has hit this specific gravy, Western Family's manufacturer has been involved in past multi-brand recalls related to contamination risks and labeling errors on similar shelf-stable mixes. It's a sign that corners may be cut behind the scenes. Number 17. Springfield Gravy Mix. Springfield is one of those budget brands people grab without thinking, but their gravy mix is a perfect example of why cheap isn't always worth it. The first ingredients? Modified starch, salt, soy protein isolates, and synthetic meat flavor, with real broth nowhere in sight. Food chemists note that this style of formula relies on chemical flavor simulators, not real cooking. The most enormous red flag with Springfield gravy is its hypersodium profile, often clocking in at 1,000 to 1,150 milligrams per serving, one of the highest in the bargain tier. For people over 55 or anyone managing blood pressure, that's a fast track to sodium spikes, bloating, and short-term blood pressure elevation. Hidden truth? Springfield's gravy uses old-school thickener, specifically low-quality modified starches that break down when heated too long. That's why buyers often complain of a watery, broken consistency after just a few minutes on the stove. Even worse, some packets include monosodium glutamate under disguised names like Flavor Enhancer 621, known to cause flushing or headaches in sensitive individuals. Its parent distributors have repeatedly been involved in multi-brand quality recalls related to improper allergen labeling, a significant concern for families dealing with soy, dairy, or gluten sensitivities. Number 16. Parade Gravy Mix. Parade Gravy Mix may look harmless on the shelf, but once you dig into what's actually inside, it becomes clear why so many shoppers regret grabbing it. One of the biggest red flags is its sodium load, which averages around 430 to 520 milligrams per prepared serving. The American Heart Association warns that frequent intake of sodium above 400 milligrams per serving can stiffen arteries and spike blood pressure over time, precisely the opposite of what families need at dinner. Customer complaints on grocery forums repeatedly mention that Parade gravy turns grainy and glue-like, even when whisked correctly. Many say the mix tastes like salted paste rather than roasted drippings. This happens because the formula leans heavily on chemical flavor boosters and low-grade starches, which thicken fast but don't dissolve smoothly. Some buyers have even shared photos of the gravy separating into brown liquid with rubbery lumps, a sign of poor emulsifier quality. Number 15. Value Time Gravy Mix. Value Time Gravy Mix is one of the cheapest options out there, but families usually end up paying the price in other ways. Each serving packs a hefty 480 to 560 milligrams of sodium, which nutrition studies from the Journal of Hypertension link to increased stroke and heart strain, especially when sodium comes from processed mineral blends, not natural broth. On consumer sites, many shoppers complain that the mix smells chemical, metallic, or like old bouillon cubes when it hits the pot. The final gravy often turns into a thick gelatin-like paste, because it uses industrial-grade gums to mimic real thickness. Others say the powder clumps instantly and leaves chalky specks floating in the sauce. A hidden concern is Value Time's reliance on oxidized vegetable fats to imitate meat flavor. Research in Food Chemistry Review found that oxidized fats can trigger inflammation markers and digestive discomfort. That explains why many customers report feeling bloated or nauseous afterward. Number 14. First Street Gravy Mix. First Street Gravy Mix is widely used in bulk buy stores, but its formulation raises serious questions for anyone who cares about health or flavor. Each serving contains 500 to 620 milligrams of sodium, nearly a third of the daily limit recommended by the CDC. This kind of sodium density can trigger fluid retention, headaches, and blood pressure spikes, especially in kids and older adults. Customers consistently complain that First Street's gravy tastes stale, like fryer oil, or weirdly buttery. That's because the mix relies on spray-dried fats, which degrade quickly. When fats oxidize, they develop off flavors that even strong salt levels can't hide. In 2022, a California grocery auditing group also found elevated peroxide values, meaning the fats were already halfway rancid before hitting the shelf. Shoppers also report that the gravy separates into oily puddles, a sign of low-quality emulsifiers unable to bind fat and water. Add to that the heavy artificial seasonings, and you get a gravy that tastes industrial rather than homemade. Number 13. Aldi Chef's Cupboard Gravy Mix. Chef's Cupboard seems like the kind of gravy mix you grab without thinking. Cheap, fast, and convenient. But once it hits the pan, the truth shows up quicker than the bubbles in the pot. The sodium alone sits around 480 to 540 milligrams per serving, the kind of number the Lancet's 2022 sodium report links to sudden post-meal blood pressure jolts, especially when the salt comes from industrial blends rather than natural stock. Real shoppers aren't shy about calling out what happens next. A gravy that thickens too fast, then collapses into a dull, floury sludge. Many describe a strange, stale pantry smell, like spices that spent a few too many seasons sitting in a warehouse. Others say the packet sometimes contains hard little nuggets of powder, hinting at moisture creeping in long before the mix reached your home. Behind the curtain, Chef's Cupboard sources significant pre-made seasoning bases from bulk processors overseas, where ingredients sit stored for extended periods. By the time it reaches your kitchen, the powdered fats are already nearing oxidation, and the flavors taste tired. This isn't comforting homemade-style gravy. It's a shortcut packed with compromises. Number 12. Millville Pantry Gravy Mix. Millville Pantry Gravy is the kind of product that promises classic flavor but delivers something closer to cafeteria shortcut sauce. Its sodium load 450 to 520 milligrams per serving may not look shocking until you remember you're pairing it with salty sides like mashed potatoes and stuffing. According to the Harvard School of Public Health, this kind of layered sodium intake can spike fluid retention within hours. But the real disappointment shows up in the pot. Shoppers repeatedly complain that Millville's gravy behaves like it has a mind of its own, watery on the edges, clumpy in the center, and never quite settling into a smooth texture. The taste? Many describe it as flat, dusty, or old bread soaked in broth. This isn't seasoning, it's survival mode cooking. Millville Pantry often uses surplus seasoning blends, repurposed from other low-cost product lines to cut expenses. That means every packet can taste slightly different depending on what leftover blend was used that month. If you were hoping for something warm, savory, and Sunday dinner worthy, Millville Pantry's mix will feel like a harsh reality check. Cheap on the shelf, disappointing on the plate. Number 11. Spartan Gravy Mix. Spartan Gravy Mix looks harmless enough, with simple packaging, nostalgic branding, the kind of item your grandmother may have bought decades ago. But nostalgia only goes so far. Inside the packet is a formula that loads 500 to 580 milligrams of sodium into a single serving. The type of processed sodium the Journal of Clinical Nutrition associates with long-term water retention and increased heart strain. The story gets worse in the kitchen. Users often describe the moment the powder hits hot water as a cloud of metallic, dusty aroma, a sign that the powdered seasonings have oxidized. As it cooks, the gravy tends to split, oily circles floating on top, thin brown liquid underneath. Some customers even say the flavor reminds them of old bouillon cubes stored in a warm cupboard, sharp and oddly metallic. The hidden truth? Spartan relies on institutional seasoning suppliers, the same ones selling mixes to low-budget cafeterias and hospitals. These blends prioritize shelf stability, not taste. So what you're really pouring over your dinner isn't comfort. It's a formula engineered to withstand storage, not to taste like real pan drippings. Number 10. H-E-B Hill Country Fare Gravy Mix. Hill Country Fare has the friendly, down-home look Texans trust, but once the powder hits the pot, that comfort food illusion fades fast. The mix pushes 480 to 550 milligrams of sodium per serving. The kind of ultra-refined salt blend that Texas A&M Food Science research notes can trigger rapid water retention and after-meal blood pressure spikes, especially when paired with salty sides. Consumers often report that Hill Country Fare gravy develops a rubbery film on top, the kind seen when low-grade emulsifiers fail under heat. Others describe a sharp, slightly bitter finish, like browned spices that sat in a hot warehouse too long. A handful of reviewers even complain the mix smells burnt and dusty before it even dissolves. The hidden truth? Hill Country Fare relies heavily on mass-blended base powders meant for high-volume retail, which means ingredients often sit in storage for long periods before packaging. By the time it reaches your dinner table, the fats and seasonings are already losing their potency. Instead of tasting like slow-simmered drippings, it tastes like something assembled for shelf life, not flavor. Number 9. Pampa Gravy Mix. Pampa is one of those dollar store staples people grab thinking, gravy is gravy. How bad can it be? The answer? Surprisingly bad. The sodium alone hovers around 520 to 600 milligrams per serving, and according to a 2023 Heart Health meta-analysis, processed sodium paired with chemical thickeners can amplify blood pressure spikes far more aggressively than natural salt. The biggest complaints? Consistency disasters. Shoppers say Pampa gravy swings between soupy broth and cement paste, never hitting a middle ground. The flavor is often described as mysteriously fake, vague meat flavor, or simply like licking a bouillon cube. Several consumers have posted photos of dark specks in the powder, usually old spice fragments breaking down. Because Pampa is an imported bargain brand, batches are frequently produced using very low-cost dehydrated fat powders and warehouse-aged seasoning blends. These ingredients oxidize fast, which explains the metallic twang many people taste. It's budget-friendly on the shelf, but once you know what's really inside, it feels less like a deal and more like a compromise you don't want on your dinner plate. Number 8. Great American Gravy Mix. Great American markets itself like a classic Sunday dinner shortcut, but what's actually inside has frustrated shoppers for years. The mix delivers 470 to 560 milligrams of sodium per serving, right in the danger zone highlighted by the American Heart Association's 2023 Sodium Advisory, which warns that repeated intake of processed sodium blends increases long-term cardiovascular strain. Customers routinely complain that Great American Gravy tastes strangely metallic and overly sharp, as if the spices were roasted too long before drying. Some reviewers mention that the sauce thickens unevenly, chunky in some spots, watery in others, a clear sign of low-end starches that don't disperse properly. Others say the finished sauce feels gritty in the mouth, indicating poorly milled seasoning granules. Behind the scenes, Great American partners with contract processors who blend unrefined flavor bases and aging dehydrated fats, creating an inconsistent final product. These ingredients can develop off-notes over time, which explains the chemical-like aroma that shows up as soon as the powder hits hot water. Number 7. Pantry Pride Gravy Mix. Pantry Pride looks like the kind of old-school gravy packet your grandmother might have kept in the back of the cupboard, but open it today and you'll realize it's nostalgia wrapped around a problem. The powder smells faintly metallic and stale, a sign that the spices inside have oxidized, a common issue with older bulk seasonings stored for long periods. When you mix it, the gravy swings wildly between too thin and pudding thick, with little middle ground. Many shoppers describe it as mushy, weirdly sweet, or like someone mixed broth with chalk. Here's the kicker. Sodium levels in Pantry Pride-style mixes typically hover around 520 to 580 milligrams per serving. And studies in the Nutrients Journal show that processed sodium paired with modified starches can spike fluid retention and blood pressure faster than natural broth-based sodium. Complaints also mention gritty bits that refuse to dissolve, usually leftover starch clumps from low-grade fillers. The hidden truth? Pantry Pride relies on bulk industrial seasoning blends originally formulated for cafeterias, not home kitchens. That's why the gravy tastes flat, artificial, and oddly dusty. If you are hoping for homemade flavor, this mix delivers disappointment more than dinner. Number 6. Sunny Select Gravy Mix. Sunny Select looks harmless, but behind those bright packages sits one of the more concerning entries on this list. This brand has already dealt with a real FDA-posted recall for its Au Jus gravy mix after the manufacturer failed to disclose a dairy allergen, putting anyone with milk sensitivity at risk. That alone is a major red flag. But the issues don't stop at allergens. Customers repeatedly complain that Sunny Select gravy tastes burnt, tinny, or like watered-down soy sauce, which is no surprise once you see how heavily it leans on artificially flavored bouillon bases and aging powdered fats. The sodium load typically ranges from 480 to 550 milligrams per serving, a level that researchers at the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition link to sharp post-meal spikes in blood pressure for adults eating processed sodium. Another common complaint? Texture chaos. Sometimes it thickens into sludge, other times it refuses to thicken at all. That's because low-cost gravies often use recycled starch blends, leftovers from other products, mixed in to cut manufacturing costs. Number 5. Price Chopper Gravy Mix. Price Chopper's house brand gravy might promise budget comfort, but what you get inside the pouch is a long way from homemade. Open it and you're hit with a strong bouillon smell, salty, sharp, and unmistakably artificial. The powder relies heavily on MSG, maltodextrin, hydrogenated oils, and modified cornstarch, giving the gravy a flavor that reviewers describe as chemical, too salty, and like cafeteria food from the 90 seconds. The sodium content typically lands in the 500 to 600 milligrams range. Research in the European Journal of Preventive Cardiology warns that frequent intake of processed sodium combined with refined oils can increase chronic inflammation and raise hypertension risk over time. And when customers prepare it, they note another issue: separation. The gravy forms a brown pool with oily rings floating on top, a classic sign of cheap powdered fats that fail to emulsify. Price Chopper sources many of its gravy flavor bases from industrial food service suppliers, the kind that design powders for schools, hospitals, and institutional kitchens. That's why the flavor tastes mass-produced, flat, and aggressively salty. This isn't real gravy. It's a shortcut that tastes exactly like one. Number 4. Weiss Quality Gravy Mix. Weiss Quality aims to look like a step above the typical Barkin brand gravy, but once you start mixing it, the illusion fades fast. The powder has a musty, slightly metallic smell, which is usually a sign that the dehydrated fats and spices have been sitting in storage far too long. Once prepared, many shoppers describe the flavor as overly salty, strangely sour, or like instant ramen seasoning pretending to be gravy. Each serving packs 520 to 570 milligrams of sodium, and research in the Hypertension Journal warns that frequent consumption of processed sodium paired with refined starches can worsen blood pressure swings in adults over 40. Texturally, Weiss Quality gets a lot of complaints for turning gummy or forming small gelatin-like lumps that never fully dissolve. Several customers have reported burst packets and moisture-damaged powder, which happens when lower-grade paper packaging can't withstand humidity during transport. Hidden truth: Weiss relies on mass-produced flavor bases commonly sold to cafeterias and institutional kitchens. That's why the taste is flat, aggressively salty, and nothing like real drippings. For comfort food cravings, this mix feels more like a shortcut gone wrong. Number 3. Food Club Gravy Mix. Food Club tries to present itself as the dependable, no-frills gravy choice, but once you pour it into boiling water, the problems start showing. Many customers complain that the gravy turns watery with floating oil specks, a classic indicator of cheap powdered fat that refuses to emulsify. Others describe the flavor as bitter, oddly smoky, or like powdered bouillon mixed with cardboard. Sodium sits at a hefty 500 to 620 milligrams per serving, and a 2023 study in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that processed sodium, combined with hydrolyzed vegetable proteins commonly used in Food Club mix, can intensify thirst, swelling, and post-meal fatigue. The artificial roasted flavor comes from chemical enhancers designed to mimic drippings, but instead, they create a slightly burnt aftertaste that many reviewers hate. While Food Club hasn't had a recall tied specifically to gravy, their parent suppliers have had previous recalls for spice contamination in other products, including salmonella-tainted seasoning blends, which raises eyebrows about ingredient sourcing. Number 2. Homestyle Select Gravy Mix. Homestyle Select sounds comforting, almost like something you'd expect from a warm Sunday dinner, but what you actually get is one of the thinnest, most artificial-tasting gravies on store shelves. The powder often clumps right out of the packet, something shoppers frequently point out. That usually means the seasoning sat in hot warehouses long enough for oils inside the powder to melt and resolidify partially. Flavor-wise, the gravy leans harsh and salty, with back notes described as burnt onion, chemical beef, or like canned soup mix with no depth. The sodium load often reaches 550 to 600 milligrams per serving. And studies published in the Nutrients Journal show that ultra-processed sodium, combined with oxidized spices, can heighten inflammation and water retention. The brand has faced multiple customer complaints about packets arriving ripped, dusty, or with discolored powder, warning signs of degraded ingredients. Homestyle select contracts with low-bid manufacturing plants that frequently use stale, end-of-cycle seasoning batches, which explains the inconsistent taste and unpredictable thickness. Instead of a homemade flavor, you get something that tastes mass-produced and tired. Number 1. ShopRite Bowl and Basket Gravy Mix. Bowl and basket sounds wholesome, like something you'd grab for a quick Sunday dinner fix. But once this gravy hits the pot, the truth comes out fast. Rip open the packet and you're greeted with a puff of powder that smells less like roasted drippings and more like musty bouillon that spent too long in storage. Stir it in, and the gravy swings wildly between watery brown broth and gummy sludge, never finding the smooth middle you'd expect from real pan drippings. A single serving lands you with over 550 milligrams of sodium, and researchers warn that sodium from dehydrated mixes spikes blood pressure faster than natural salt because it binds with processed starches. That instant heaviness people feel after eating it? Not your imagination. Consumers complain constantly. Metallic aftertaste, smells like old fryer oil, tastes like canned soup, concentrate pretending to be gravy. And that weird bitterness? It comes from oxidized powdered fats, a sign that the base ingredients sit in warehouses for months before blending. But not every gravy mix is packed with fillers and weird additives. Some brands are actually simple, tasty, and surprisingly close to real homemade gravy, starting with number 10, McCormick Gravy Mix. McCormick is one of the rare gravy mixes that actually comes close to tasting like real pan drippings. When you open the packet, you don't get that chemical blast or dusty bouillon smell you find in cheap brands. Instead, it has a clean, roasted aroma, because McCormick uses dehydrated stock, real herbs, and natural flavor concentrates, not industrial seasoning scraps. One serving averages 260 to 300 milligrams of sodium, almost half of what bargain gravies pack, and that matters according to the American Heart Association. Cutting sodium from processed meals significantly improves blood pressure and reduces water retention. The texture is where it really stands out. Mix it in a pot and it thickens evenly, with no gummy blobs or floating oil circles. That's because McCormick doesn't rely on cheap hydrogenated fat powders. Their thickening base uses modified starches designed for stability, the same kind tested in food quality studies published in Food Chemistry Journal. McCormick actually sources ingredients from monitored suppliers instead of bulk warehouses. That's why the flavor feels balanced, savory, lightly seasoned, and close enough to homemade that most families can't tell the difference. If you're choosing a gravy packet without worrying about chemicals or overpowering salt, McCormick remains one of the safest picks. Number 9. Knorr Gravy Mix. Knorr is widely trusted for a reason. It delivers a deep, broth-like flavor without drowning your meal in salt or additives. Open the packet and you're met with a savory, clean aroma, no burnt oil smell, no stale bouillon scent. The brand uses a base made from real dehydrated stock, onion powder, herbs, and non-hydrogenated fats, giving the gravy a naturally rich finish. Sodium averages 240 to 280 milligrams per serving, which falls into the moderate range. Studies in the Nutrients Journal show that moderate sodium gravies cause significantly less post-meal blood pressure rise than ultra-processed ones. Consumers consistently praise Knorr for its smooth texture. It thickens evenly, stays glossy, and doesn't separate into brown water and oil thanks to its stable emulsifiers that food scientists actually rank as safe for repeated heating. And unlike bargain mixes, Knorr doesn't use repurposed industrial spice remnants. Their spices are processed fresh and stored in climate-controlled facilities, which prevents the metallic or bitter aftertaste that plagues cheaper brands. Knorr's gravy formulas were initially developed for European culinary standards, where artificial additives are more restricted. That's why its flavor feels clean, comforting, and closer to homemade than most American budget gravies. For families wanting convenience without chemical shortcuts, Knorr earns its spot as a safe gravy mix. Number 8. Pioneer Gravy Mix. Pioneer stands out because it actually behaves like traditional Southern-style gravy, thick, creamy, and built on a real roux base. Tear open the packet and you'll smell toasted flour and mild spices instead of sharp artificial aromas. The reason? Pioneer uses fat powders derived from real dairy, not synthetic butter flavorings. A serving lands around 230 to 260 milligrams of sodium, placing it among the lowest sodium packaged gravies available. According to the Journal of Food Science and Nutrition, lower sodium gravies paired with factual roux bases reduce post-meal bloating and sodium spikes significantly. Users often praise Pioneer for its consistency. It doesn't clump, split, or get gummy because the mix is designed with traditional thickening ratios used in restaurant kitchens. Even reheated, it keeps its smooth texture, a rare win for packet gravies. The hidden truth? Pioneer is one of the few gravy brands manufactured with batch-style blending, not mass industrial mixing. That means spices aren't stale, fats aren't oxidized, and the final flavor tastes warm and clean, almost like Grandma's Sunday gravy. If your family wants comfort food flavor without the chemical shortcuts found in cheap packets, Pioneer is one of the safest and best-tasting choices on the shelf. Number 7. Heinz Homestyle Gravy. Heinz might be famous for ketchup, but their homestyle gravy is shockingly close to real pan gravy. When you open the jar, you don't get any sharp chemical whiff, just a mild roasted aroma because Heinz uses real stock, onion, tomato extract, and vegetable-based seasonings instead of powdered artificial bases. Sodium sits around 250 to 290 milligrams per serving, nearly half of what powdered bargain gravies carry. A 2021 review in the Journal of Nutrition and Food Safety notes that gravies made from real broth produce less inflammatory response than dehydrated, salt-heavy packets. The best part? Texture. Since Heinz gravy is pre-cooked, it heats into a silky, consistent sauce without clumping or separating. Consumers often say it tastes like Thanksgiving drippings without all the work, which makes sense. Heinz uses slow, reduced stock, not mystery flavor enhancers. Heinz maintains tighter ingredient sourcing standards than most packet brands, so its fats don't oxidize and spices don't taste stale. If you want a ready-to-serve gravy that feels authentic and avoids high-sodium powders, Heinz Homestyle is one of the safest bets. Number 6. Simply Organic Gravy Mix. Simply Organic is precisely what its name promises. Clean, real ingredients without lab-made shortcuts. Tear open the packet and you'll smell herbs, pepper, and toasted flour rather than that dusty chemical scent cheaper gravies release. The mix uses organic spices, unbleached flour, and vegetable-rich stock bases, keeping sodium around 200 to 240 milligrams per serving, one of the lowest among packaged gravies. According to a 2022 study in the American Journal of Lifestyle Medicine, eating organic seasoning blends reduces exposure to synthetic pesticide residues by over 80%. Consumers love how Simply Organic thickens smoothly into a naturally glossy gravy. There's no artificial coloring, no partially hydrogenated fat, and no MSG. This means the flavor tastes warm, herbal, and clean, almost like a homemade gravy that simmered on the stove. The hidden truth? Simply Organic sources spices from small regenerative farms, not mass seasoning warehouses. Because the spices are fresher, the flavor hits deeper without needing artificial boosters. If you're avoiding additives and want a safe, real food gravy, this is one of the best packets you can buy. Number 5. Better Than Bouillon. Better Than Bouillon isn't technically a powdered gravy mix. It's a concentrated paste made from real roasted meat, vegetables, and slow-cooked stock. And that's precisely why it's one of the safest and most flavorful options. Each teaspoon contains substantially less sodium than standard bouillon cubes, about 230 to 260 milligrams, and a Harvard School of Public Health analysis notes that gravies made from factual stock bases improve flavor without relying on synthetic enhancers. The rich aroma hits instantly when you open the jar because it's made from actual beef, chicken, or vegetables simmered down until concentrated. Once you whisk it with a bit of flour or cornstarch, it becomes a deeply savory gravy with a clean finish, not the metallic bite found in cheap mixes. Better Than Bouillon uses a low-temperature reduction process, preserving natural amino acids and roasted flavors while avoiding the burnt, oxidized taste familiar in dehydrated powders. It's one of the few options that tastes convincingly homemade and gives you complete control over saltiness. Number 4. Watkins Organic Gravy Mix. Watkins has been around since the 1800s, and their organic gravy mix shows why the brand still survives. Real ingredients, clean spices, and no unnecessary fillers. When you open the packet, the aroma is warm and herbal, not chemical or dusty, because Watkins uses organic pepper, garlic, onion, and non-GMO starches, with sodium around 210 to 250 milligrams, ideal for heart-conscious families. A 2020 Food Research International study shows that organic spice blends retain more antioxidants and fewer contaminants compared to conventional dried seasonings. Mix it up, and the gravy thickens evenly with a smooth pan-style consistency. No greasy rings, no clumps, and no weird aftertaste. Consumers often describe the flavor as Sunday roast without the work, which is precisely what happens when spices aren't stale or oxidized. Watkins grinds spices in small batches, which keeps flavors vibrant and prevents the metallic bitterness found in mass-produced mixes. It's one of the cleanest, most trustworthy gravy packets, perfect for anyone wanting old-fashioned comfort without chemical shortcuts. Number 3. Campbell's ready-to-serve gravy. Campbell's is one of the few mainstream gravies that actually behaves like real pan drippings when heated. Instead of powdered flavor bases, Campbell's uses real stock, rendered fat, and slow-cooked vegetables, giving the gravy a naturally roasted aroma instead of that dusty smell that cheaper packets release. Sodium sits around 230 to 260 milligrams, which is significantly lower than the 480 to 600 milligram range found in bargain mixes. A 2021 study in Advances in Nutrition showed that gravies made from cooked stock produce fewer inflammatory compounds than dehydrated flavor powders, a significant reason Campbell's tastes smoother and cleaner. The texture is consistent and velvety, with no separation or oily rings on top. Consumers often describe it as holiday gravy in a can, which fits because Campbell's relies on absolute broth reduction rather than artificial thickeners. Number 2. Stonewall Kitchen Gravy. Stonewall Kitchen is basically the opposite of mass-market gravy. Small batch, slow reduced, and built from real ingredients you'd actually use at home. Their turkey and beef gravies are made from real drippings, butter, herbs, and sautéed aromatics, giving them a depth you rarely get from powders. Sodium is moderate, 220 to 240 milligrams per serving, and free of artificial colors, MSG, and synthetic flavor boosters. A 2022 Journal of Culinary Science and Technology study found that gravies made from real roux and fat sources maintain flavor stability better than dehydrated powders, which explains Stonewall's fresh taste. When heated, the gravy thickens into a glossy, silky sauce, without clumping or turning gritty. Consumers consistently praise its holiday-level flavor, and chefs often recommend it for people who want restaurant-style gravy without cooking from scratch. Number 1. Trader Joe's Gravy. Trader Joe's gravy, especially their turkey gravy and savory herb gravy, is one of the best clean, budget-friendly options you can get. It's made with real stock, vegetable purees, butter, and herbs, not dehydrated fat powders or artificial meat flavors. Sodium runs about 240 to 270 milligrams per serving, keeping it well below most powdered mixes. A 2020 review in the Journal of Food Composition notes that gravies made from genuine vegetable reductions contain fewer oxidized compounds and deliver more natural umami, which is precisely why TJ's gravy tastes richer than anything in a packet. You don't get clumps, oily separation, or that stale aftertaste typical in cheap gravies. Instead, you get a smooth, savory, herb-forward gravy that actually tastes like it came from the roasting pan. Customers often say it tastes like Thanksgiving without the stress, and that's because TJ's sources fresher broth bases than most private label brands. Hidden truth? Trader Joe's has tighter supplier audits than big box store brands, meaning fewer old spices, fewer shortcuts, and fresher stock. For families wanting clean, safe, real-tasting gravy, TJ's is a go-to.